It's a strange thing how one moment of failure can feel louder than a lifetime of faithfulness. For some people, it's a heated word. But for others, it's a sin they never imagined they could commit. And for many, it's a moment. Just one moment where your courage collapsed under the weight of fear. There was a man who stopped serving the church he was in. He stopped attending the small group he was in. And he began to sit in the back every Sunday with his head down, keeping to himself. He hadn't left the faith, but he had quietly resigned himself to a spiritual exile because of a failure of faith that had happened years before. The guilt ate him from the inside out. He never stopped believing God, and he believed God could forgive other people, but not him. Not after what he had done. I know God loves me, but I just don't believe that he can use me ever again. And that's exactly where we find Peter at the end of John's gospel this morning. He still believes in Jesus. He ran to the tomb. He saw him risen. He was in the locked room when Jesus appeared. But inside, he is carrying an open wound that remains unhealed. He denied his Lord 3 times. And Jesus has not yet spoken a word to him about it. The rooster may have crowed twice, but the sound of its crowing has been echoing in Peter's head ever since, and he cannot stop hearing the crow. But in the final chapter of John's gospel, the risen Jesus now does something breathtaking. He comes for Peter. He comes to meet him, the disciple who failed him the most, not to rebuke him, but to restore him and to recommission him for the work only the grace of God could possibly qualify him for. And in so doing, the risen Jesus reveals that he is the Lord who restores the fallen, who redirects the willing, and who recommissions all his disciples, past, present, and future, for faithful service to his mission in unique and specific ways, which may be different from anyone and for anyone, without comparison, same mission, same destination, but sometimes a different road of ministry to get there. That's part of what we're going to see in the epilogue of John's gospel as it's come to be known. John chapter 21. We had the prologue, if you'll recall in the opening chapter, the first 18 verses, John sets the tone and he gives us a snapshot of his themes, of his theology, of his purpose in writing, of his focus with the highest Christology, certainly some of the highest you'll find in all of Scripture and the New Testament. And then he writes all his gospel. And he centers it around 7 miraculous signs that Jesus performs, culminating in the chief of all signs, the resurrection from the dead. And then he wraps it up as we come to the end. Jesus is raised. Jesus has appeared to Mary Magdalene, we saw in chapter 20. Then he appears to the disciples in the room, including Thomas a week later. John gives us the purpose of his writing in chapter 20, verse 30. Right? Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. And then there's a final narrative to bring his gospel to a close, to a climactic close. You may think, how much more climactic could it be than already presenting Jesus in his risen glory to his disciples and to his followers? And you'll see as he brings it to a close in the final 2 verses. But he picks it up in John 21, verse 1. After this, doesn't tell us when, but sometime after that, certainly before the 40 days that he spent before he ascended, after this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. That's the Sea of Galilee. And he revealed himself in this way. Notice the language John's using already. This is divine, theological, Christological, revelatory language. He revealed himself. This is yet another revelation of his risen glory, the glory of God that he has yet to impress upon his disciples, his closest of followers. There's something yet he needs to do to form them, to shape them, to prepare them. There's something more they need to know and see about him before he'll finally send them out to continue the mission for which he'll send them to. Verse 2, Simon, Peter, Thomas, called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, and the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of his disciples were together. 7 of them. Not the 12, less Judas, 11 at this point. We don't know where the others are at, but we know there's 7. Nathanael of Cana, mentioned for the first time since the wedding at Cana in John chapter 2 in his calling. We're actually told now that he's from there originally. Thomas, we just met him earlier, the legendary doubting Thomas, which is a bit of a misnomer when he was merely just asking for the same kind of revelation that the others had when he wasn't present with them in that room when Jesus had first appeared. Simon Peter, we know him well. And the sons of Zebedee, that's James and John. John the apostle and the gospel writer. And 2 unnamed disciples. Verse 3, Simon Peter said to them, I am going fishing. They said to him, we will go with you. They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. So now they go back fishing. You say, wait a second, what's going on here? Is this a kind of apostasy? Are they turning away? Are they going back to the old lives from which Jesus called them from? When he called them at the beginning of his ministry and the gospel, when he said, come, follow me? No, I don't think that's it. This is not apostasy. This is not unbelief on their part, Peter or the others that follow him. They just saw him in his risen glory in chapter 20. No, it's not that. It's a kind of waiting. It's a transitional period. They are waiting until he comes back to them with further instruction and direction. That's what it is. It's a kind of patient, waiting, obedience, if you will, even. They go back to doing something that is familiar to them. Fishing. And so they get out on the boat. And all night they caught nothing, notice, verse 3. And then suddenly, verse 4, just as the day is breaking, Jesus stood on the shore. Yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. So the day is breaking, the light is dim, and for whatever reason, whether it is a divine withholding on his part or simply because of the dimness of the dawn lighting, they do not recognize it as him standing at the shore. And Jesus says to them, a typical, casual, Galilean fisherman's greeting. Children, do you have any fish? They answered him, no. Jesus isn't asking because he doesn't know the answer to the question. He knows all things. He's omniscient. He's not inquiring because he wants to know whether or not their overnight fishing expedition has been successful. No, he is asking them a probing question because he is going to be leading them into another lesson. It's a question that's meant to lead to a lesson, to an instruction. Have you caught anything? It's almost rhetorical. You haven't caught anything, have you? Even though you're out all night. They said no. 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 Probably even annoyed at this part. Who's this random guy by the shore asking us after we've been up all night fishing and we got nothing? Nothing to show for it. No. And he says to them, cast the net on the right side of the boat and you will find some. So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of the fish. And so Jesus, in his divine omniscience and omnipotence, he instructs them to cast the net on the right side, starboard, because Jesus knows where the fish are. Jesus, as the Lord and creator of the universe, knows where the fish that he created are in the sea. He says, cast it on the right side. He knows where they are, and he knows how to fill empty nets, just as he knows how to fill empty hearts. And now, their net is so full, notice, they were not even able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. And so now you can't help but see the parallel with Luke 5 also, when the quantity of fish in the nets was so large and so vast that it actually tore through the net. The rope couldn't even hold it. But this is a different story. It's not the same one for any who would confuse the two, because then the net broke. Here, the net doesn't break at all. They're just simply not able to haul it in. And we'd be remiss if we didn't also notice the connection with John 15. John 15 and that wonderful I am statement where he says, I am the true vine, you are the branches. And then what does he say? Apart from me, apart from being connected to me, apart from abiding in me, you can do nothing. Nothing. And this is an object lesson of that. They'd been trying to catch fish all night, and yet they were able to catch nothing. And so it's a physical lesson, which I think leads out a spiritual one in the sense of divine fishing. Fishing for souls. Neither can they do that or will they be able to do that apart from him. Because apart from him, we can do nothing. But then he comes and he issues the word. And suddenly, their nets are overflowing. Verse 7, that disciple whom Jesus loved, right, the beloved disciple, we've been meeting him, and we're going to see explicitly, finally, who his identity is, though we know at this point it's John the apostle. You're going to see him say that shortly. Immediately, he's got the insight, and he says, it's the Lord. Peter, it's the Lord. He's got the insight, but Simon has the impulse, which marks him and his character. Simon Peter heard it, that it was the Lord, and he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and threw himself into the sea. So now he's not even thinking clearly. Why would you put on your outer cloak and then jump into the water to get it all soaked, right? They would take it off so that they would be working as they were fishing on the sea all day. He's so excited. It's the risen Lord. He doesn't even know what he's doing anymore. He puts on his outer cloak, and he jumps in the water, which would make it that much harder for him to swim that 100 yards or so back to the shore. But he does that anyways because he is overjoyed and he's excited once again at the chance to meet his risen Lord. And then the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net of fish, for they were not far from the land, about 100 yards off. Wow. So now they're all ashore. And when they got out on land, they saw a charcoal fire in place with fish laid out on it and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you have just caught." So now they come back to shore, and Jesus, ever the servant that he is, the suffering servant who would give his life a ransom for many, the one who he says in Mark 10:45 did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. Here you have him again serving his disciples. Not unlike in John 13, when he served them by taking off his outer garment, wrapping a towel around his waist, stooping to his knees, filling a basin with water, and washing the disciples' dirty, dusty, desert-trodden feet. He serves them again. Food. He who laid his life in service for them. This is Jesus. And notice that word there, charcoal fire. That's an important one here for John, at least in Peter's mind, because it's only ever used once to describe that fire in the high priest's courtyard. The fire of denial for Peter. The one in front of which he denied his Lord 3 times. 3 times. So Jesus here is resetting the scene. He's taking Peter back to that fateful night just a few weeks ago when he denied him 3 times. It's another charcoal fire. And this time, there's fish and there's bread. This is not a picture of communion or the Last Supper, the Lord's Supper. They've already had that. This is Jesus simply preparing them for what's to come. Before he's going to put a shepherd's staff in Peter's hand, he's going to put some bread and fish in it. Before he's going to fill Peter's heart, he's going to fill his stomach. Because he cares also for the physical needs of people. And they've just been out fishing all night. They're hungry. They're tired. He says, "Come, have some breakfast." Can you imagine how Jesus cooked that breakfast? Must have been the best bread and fish anyone could eat. Sounds super plain for us 2,000 years later. I always wondered, did he cook it over the fire? I mean, he had the fire and everything. Did he make the fire with sticks, or did he just say, fire, bread, fish? Poof. So the scene is set. And he tells him to bring some more. Bring some of the fish that you've just brought. Verse 11. So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them. Wow, that's a lot of fish. And notice, what are the other disciples doing? I don't know. Evidently, they weren't big or burly or strong enough. Peter goes back and he hauls the net ashore. It says they couldn't earlier. All 10 of them. But Peter does. Maybe he's full of adrenaline and excitement. And he says, "Come have breakfast." Now, none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. That's a strange thing to say there. Why would they need to dare ask him? Is John suggesting that they still were wavering and doubting? No, the idea behind the language there is that this is both fear and faith mixed together yet. It's still hard for them to fully process the Lord which they beheld crucified and nailed to the cross, bloodied, battered, and dead, is now in front of them enjoying a meal together. It's more like could this really be him? Could this actually be true? I mean, we know it is, but it's too good to be true. And so it says none of them dared ask because they knew it was him. It was futile to ask something so obvious. They knew it was the Lord. So Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and so with the fish. This was now the 3rd time that Jesus was revealed to the disciples after he was raised. The 3rd time. John makes that clear, at least in his gospel. To them specifically. We know he had other appearances, including to Mary Magdalene and the other women, but this is the 3rd time to the disciples. But now the scene is set. And they've had their breakfast. Verse 15. And when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, and so now you can already see the tension building up. As he turns to look at Peter, and Peter now knows what's coming. He turns to Peter, and he says to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Notice, he doesn't call him Simon the rock now. Peter, the rock upon which I will build my church. Now, he takes Peter all the way back to the beginning, to his identity and his posture and his position before he knew and met and believed in Jesus. He was just Simon Bar-Jonah, son of John, a fisherman. He takes him all the way back there to humble him, to not tear him down, but as a segue to build him back up. He's taking him back to basics in the beginning. Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? You say, these? What is he talking about? The fish that he caught? The nets? The boat? Do you love me more than your old life, your old occupation as a fisherman in Galilee? No, that's not what he's saying here. What does he mean by these then? What he means by these is these others, these other disciples. Do you, Simon, son of John, love me more than they love me? That's what he's saying. Do you? And think about why he's asking this question, intentionally and specifically to Peter. Because that was the very thing that Peter claimed, didn't he? As they're walking after the Last Supper to the garden, he says, even if they all abandon you, I will never fall away, Jesus. I will follow you into death if I have to, because I love you. That's the implication. And we all know what happened from there. Not only did he run and abandon, but he denied 3 times. And so now Jesus is bringing him back there. Simon, you've said you love me before more than these. And we all know what happened after that. So I'm going to ask you again. Simon, do you love me? Look at his answer. Yes, Lord. You know that I love you. He doesn't ground his answer anymore in his own bravado, in his own courage, in his own strength. He grounds his answer in the Lord's knowledge. It's not even about him anymore. He's starting to get it. He says, Lord, you know that I love you. How does Jesus reply? He said to him, then feed my lambs. Feed my lambs. The little ones. Feed them. He said to Simon a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Again, he appeals to Jesus' knowledge of his own heart and mind, not anything that he could offer of himself to prove and to demonstrate his love and devotion to Jesus. And Jesus answers him. He said to him, tend my sheep. And Jesus asks him a third time, notice, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And now Peter's disposition changes. Look at what John says. Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love me? Now he's grieved. Now that wound is open. And now in his mind, Jesus is pressing his thumb on the wound all over again, asking him. There's no doubt that he's starting to realize what's happening here. 3 denials, 3 questions. And in his mind, Jesus is tearing him down, hurting him. But that's not what's happening here. Jesus is like the divine surgeon who is using the scalpel masterfully to cut exactly where and what needs to be cut for a successful precision and procedure. And he's grieved. And at this point, he's got nothing left to say. What am I going to say? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. But notice how much further he grounds his answer in the Lord's knowledge now. This time, he's grieved, he's sad, he's depressed all over again. And he says, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. And so now he grounds his answer totally in Jesus' omniscience. You know that I love you because you know everything, Lord. You know everything. You know everything there is about everything and about me and my own thoughts and my heart and my motives, which can be deceitful, that I may not fully understand myself. But I rest and I trust in your knowledge. You know that I love you. And Jesus says to him, feed my sheep. For a third time. Feed my sheep. Notice what Jesus doesn't say to him. Notice what he doesn't ask him. He could have came down hard on him with a rebuke after all of his brazenness and bravado. He could have said, Peter, why did you deny me? Peter, how could you deny me? Peter, how could you be such a coward? He doesn't do that. He approaches him and cuts straight to the heart of the matter, and the matter of the heart, which is love. Love and affection for Jesus. That is the mark and the qualification for ministry and discipleship, and in Peter's case, apostolic ministry. That is it. Do you love me? And in his rich mercy and grace, imagine that. He gives Peter 3 chances to affirm his love for Jesus after 3 denials. 1 for each denial. Incredible. And Peter is not just merely forgiven here. This is a restoration that's happening. This is a restoration, and notice an entrusting with the flock. He says, feed my sheep, feed my lambs, tend my sheep. He doesn't just restore him now. This is a recommissioning that's happening. Peter's being built up slowly as this conversation is coming to a conclusion before he'll send him out as the de facto leader of the 11, soon to be 12. That's what's happening here. He's restoring him. He doesn't bring up the charcoal fire before. He doesn't bring up the servant girl. He doesn't bring up the garden incident with the high priest's servant Malchus when he struck his ear off. He doesn't bring any of that up. He just brings Peter up. He brings Peter back up to the point which really matters, to help him realize his love and affection for Jesus is genuine. It's genuine. Feed my sheep. And then, after restoring him, recommissioning him, he's got something else to say to Peter. Truly, truly, verse 18, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. Peter was a man of impulse, right? Do first, think after kind of a thing. You jump first, speak first, act first, run first. You do all these things evidently as a young man of impulse. He's saying something's going to change as you get older. You're going to lose that independent spirit that you had. Look at the rest of that verse. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. You're independent now. You're brazen now. You're impulsive now. You're act first, think after now. But something's going to change as you get older. Because as you get older, what's going to happen is you're going to stretch out your hands and they're going to lead you to a place that you don't want to go. What is he talking about here? That's a kind of euphemism. That was a saying, stretching out your hands, that in that first century context, everybody understood referred to crucifixion. Because that's what they would do. The Roman soldiers, as they're tying down the victim's hands or nailing their hands to the cross, they would have to stretch out their hands because the victim would be resisting. And so one or two soldiers would be stretching out the hand while another cocks back the hammer to nail them to the cross. That's what they would do to the crossbeam portion, the patibulum. He's talking about crucifixion here. Crucifixion. Death, where you don't want to go. And this, he said, to show by what kind of death he was to glorify God. He puts this as a parenthetical note, John, here, in case anybody is wondering what exactly he means by stretching out his hands. John makes it clear he's talking about the cross, a Roman cross, crucifixion. And through his crucifixion, he will similarly glorify God, just as Jesus, the Son of God, did, in a far less glorious way. We know that Jesus' death and crucifixion was unique. It was the once-for-all atonement for sin. But nevertheless, he too will glorify God through his death on the cross. Why? How would that glorify God? Because he is going to be willing to lay down his life for his Lord. This is an incredible promise and prophecy here that Jesus is making. He's now saying, Peter, I'm going to give you an opportunity to actually do what you said you would do earlier as we were walking to the garden. You said you would follow me into death. Then you weren't ready, but soon I'm going to give to you my Spirit, which will empower you and enable you to do all sorts of wonderful things for my name's sake as a witness to the transforming power of the gospel, including being willing to lay down your life for me. And that will bring much glory to God. I'm giving you a chance to redeem yourself. This is incredible. And that's exactly what happens, by the way. It's not in the New Testament. It's not in chapter and verse, but early church tradition tells us that Peter was crucified during the reign of Nero in the 60s, AD 60. He was. That's what happened to Peter. This happened. What an incredible promise. What a privilege. He gets to do the very thing that he said Jesus would do, but first failed to do. But it's also another rich promise and encouragement for Peter. Because he doesn't say you're going to do this now, notice. He says, when you get old. He's promising Peter evidently longevity, a long life, decades of faithful gospel ministry, shepherding his people, planting churches, training leaders, preaching the gospel, baptizing new converts, writing even New Testament inspired revelation in his letters. He's promising him a long life. Saying this isn't going to happen to you now, notice, when you get older. When you get older. Imagine that. Imagine having that confidence for Peter, then to go into his ministry knowing God is with me and God has promised to use me in a mighty way for decades to come. So I will fear no man or what man can do to me. This is an incredible promise. And after saying this, notice, after saying this, he said to him, "Follow me. Follow me." So now, not only does Jesus take Peter back to the high priest's courtyard and that charcoal fire and the servant girl and the horrors of that denial and the hurt and the heartache and the shame, especially in that moment as Luke recalls the story in chapter 22, verse 61, as the rooster crowed, immediately Jesus looked down from the high priest's balcony as he was in that kangaroo court phony trial, and he locks eyes with Peter, and that gaze of his Lord was too much, and he immediately turns away, weeping bitterly, and runs. He brings him there, but then he brings him up, and now he brings him back all the way to the beginning, to John chapter 1, when he says, "Follow me. Follow me." The same call. The same call at the beginning of his commissioning is the same call of his recommissioning. Follow me. That's the idea here. And this again just brings out the reality of biblical discipleship to Jesus is not merely a one-time decision. It's a lifelong direction. You see the difference? It's never saying one prayer. It's not responding to an altar call and then going to live whatever life you want as the Lord of your own life, following your own desires. No, it is following Him for the rest of your life. It is not a decision, it is a new direction. A new direction. One that you continue in is the idea. You got to continue in it. And Peter's future will be costly, but glorious. It's no longer going to be self-confidence for Peter going forward, but Spirit-empowered obedience. Then something else happens. Notice verse 20. As Peter turns, evidently, and he sees the disciple whom Jesus loved following them, and then he's describing himself here, John, the one who also had leaned back against him during the supper and had said, "Lord, who is it that is going to betray you?" You remember that back at that Last Supper scene in John 13. That was also there, the beloved disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, that affectionate term that John loves to use for himself. And you'll see him finally identify himself in a few verses. But either way, what's happening here, Peter has just been restored. He's been recommissioned. He's been redirected for an incredible, lofty, long ministry. And yet immediately he does what we often do, which is turn to look at someone else. Turn immediately to compare ourselves to someone else. He sees, evidently, he's walking with Jesus. John is probably trailing beside as they're on the shore of Galilee. And he looks and he turns and he sees John. He says, "Wait a second, Lord, what about him?" He says, "What about him? What about this man?" He says. What about him? You see what's happening here. It's what happens so quickly in our hearts if we're not careful. Even to a disciple who's been so freshly and recently restored by the restoring grace of the risen Lord, even he succumbs to the weakness and the temptation in the flesh to immediately look and say, well, what about him, Jesus? What about him? This is not necessarily a malicious question, by the way, from Peter. He's not malicious, he's not angry, he's not necessarily coming from a bad place, but he is coming from the wrong place, the place of comparison. He's saying, okay, Lord, I hear that I'm going to have to suffer for your name's sake, and I'm going to have to die. I'm going to get the privilege of actually seeing my promise through to follow you into death, even death by a cross. But if my calling is painful, will his be too? If I have to suffer, Lord, will he also be asked to suffer? Why is my road different than his? Will his be different than mine too? And notice Jesus' response. A gentle but firm rebuke. If it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. In other words, Peter, John's story is John's story. My will for him is my will for him. And your story is your story, which is my will for you. That's what matters. Don't look at John, don't look at James, don't look at Nate, don't look at Thomas, don't look at any of the others. Look to me. Your job is to look at me. Follow me, Peter. That's what he's saying. That's an imperative there. It's a command. You see the exclamation mark. Follow me. Don't worry about John and whatever plans I have for him. You only worry about following me. And Jesus here is not discouraging healthy concern for others. By the way, he is simply correcting unhealthy comparisons to others. Big difference here. Peter, your eyes must remain on me, not on the callings that I have and have set for others. And his reply here underscores the diversity of discipleship, doesn't it? The same Lord may assign different paths, different ministries, and different forms of suffering even to his people, yet all of which bring him the same glory. And Jesus' words here cut through one of the most pervasive spiritual dangers in every age, not just in Jesus' day here with Peter. It's the belief that faithfulness should look the same in everyone. That gospel ministry, the Great Commission, should look the same for everyone. No. Faithfulness is not uniform. It is personal. It is individual. The same good shepherd leads each of his sheep along a path chosen specifically and sovereignly and lovingly for each one. For each one. And notice the beauty of what Jesus implies here. They're both going to glorify God. Peter will glorify God through suffering and martyrdom. And John will glorify God through longevity and witness. Won't he? He's going to write one of the 4 Gospels in the New Testament. He's going to write 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, the book of Revelation. 2 different roads, same Savior, same glory. And so Jesus' message to Peter is the same message to every disciple, to us. You don't need to know the assignment that I give to others, he's saying. You just need to understand the assignment that I'm giving to you. That's what he's saying. Like all the Gen Zers say out there, oh, he understood the assignment. He understood the assignment. She understood the assignment. We need to understand our assignment individually is the whole point, not somebody else's. Your only task is to follow me on the road I lay before you. That's what he's saying to you. Comparison is the enemy of calling. Envy is the enemy of obedience. Curiosity about others' paths is the enemy of faithfulness to your own because it distracts you. And Jesus silences all of us when we're tempted to compare. He says, follow me. Forget about their call, their ministry, their giftedness. You follow me. Stop comparing yourself to them. I'm not comparing you to them. Imagine how perfectly just and gracious of a God we have. He's not comparing us to each other. Like, oh, wow, that John is faithful. Unlike that Jacob, he's really struggling. He's not doing what he should. John prays more. John reads the Bible more. He gives more. He serves more. He has a better character. Not that person. Wow. Less points for them. Less rewards in heaven. No, that's not what he does. He's not comparing us to each other. He's not comparing you to the preacher. He's not comparing you to the pastor. He's not comparing you to the small group leader. He's not comparing you to the prayer warrior. He's not comparing you to the servant who serves humbly and faithfully day in and day out and gives their precious time. He's not even comparing you to the one who gives generously of their financial resources. He's not. He's just comparing you to you. He's comparing you to what he knows he's gifted you with and equipped you with to do, and how well or how not so well you're doing it. You are your own measuring stick. And in the end, when we're all standing for the judgment, not into eternal death, but of rewards, it's going to be, what did you do with the time I gave you, with the talents I gave you, with the treasures I gave you? I'm just comparing you to you, nobody else. And that should motivate us. That's a wonderful thing. He doesn't compare like we do. We make unfair comparisons, don't we? Across the map, not only spiritually, familially in the households. This is a problem for husbands and wives, right? Why can't you be more like so-and-so? She's such an amazing cook. She does this for her husband. She baked this cookies. I know because I saw online that she did that on her story. Therefore, she must be doing that for her husband every day. Why can't you do that? Right? Or wives, so-and-so, my friend is always posting how her husband is so handy with the DIY projects at home. He's putting up the lights. He's putting up the ornaments. He's participating in that. He's doing this. Why can't you be more like her husband? No. There's often far more than meets the eye. We're incapable of fair and equitable comparisons. But not so with God. He's fair, he's just, and he is gracious. Follow me, he says. Don't worry about anyone else. Follow me. That's the entire Christian life can be summarized in those two words and that single command. Follow me. Follow me. It's not optional. It is not optional. He doesn't say, follow me as long as the calling seems fair. He doesn't say, follow me as long as the assignment fits your expectations. He doesn't say, follow me as long as the road in following me is easy. Follow me only when the getting is good. Follow me only when you are getting everything you want. No, that's not what he says. It's an unconditional discipleship and following. He's saying, you just need to keep following, period. No conditions, full stop. Follow me. Follow me. Someone told me a story one time of two brothers in Christ who each were launching their own ministries and churches around the same time. And one saw rapid fruit. His ministry exploded. People were saved, opportunities to serve, growth, multiplication of disciples. And the other one struggled. Slow growth, difficult soil, frequent discouragement, lack of resources, no help. And over time, he began to look sideways. He began to take his eyes off of Jesus. And he said, well, why him, Lord? Well, why not me? And that comparison nearly crushed him. Until finally, an older mentor pulled him aside and spoke to him one day. He said, listen, the greatest danger to your calling is trying to live out someone else's. Christ didn't ask you to follow his road. He asked you to follow him. And the man later said those words saved his ministry because it reminded him and reoriented him back to Jesus and following him, and reminded him that obedience is measured not by outcomes, but by faithfulness. Faithfulness. And trusting the outcomes to Jesus. And then, verse 23, so the saying spread abroad among the brothers that this disciple was not to die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he was not to die, but if it is my will that I remain until I come, what is that to you? So now John adds this explanatory note because a rumor started to circulate that somehow John the Apostle wasn't going to die, which led a lot of people to believe that his second coming was imminent in that living generation in 40 or 50 years or so by the time John writes his gospel in the early to mid 80s here. And he says, no, that's not what he said. Read his words carefully. He didn't say he's going to live forever or that you're going to be the living generation for when I return. He simply says, what's it to you, Peter? It's not your concern what purpose, what calling, how much longevity I give to him. You follow me. He didn't say he's going to live forever. And then John brings his gospel to a close. But it's a close which in many senses is just the beginning. Verse 24. This is the disciple who is bearing witness about these things and who has written these things, and we know that his testimony is true. So now he's saying, that's me. This beloved disciple who he's named himself a few times already. This beloved disciple who's bearing witness about these things, who's writing this gospel. That's what he means about bearing witness, written witness. He's saying, that's me. I'm him, as the kids say also. I'm him. I'm that guy. This has been me all along. The puzzle and the enigma is solved. Here, you have it in my own words. This is me. The beloved disciple is the evangelist who's writing the gospel, is the apostle John, the brother of James and the son of Zebedee. That's me, he's saying. I've written these things, all of these words in this gospel, and we know that his testimony is true. Notice now, he moves from the singular to the plural. What is he talking about here? He uses that frequently, not so much in John, but in 1 John, he keeps calling himself we. He's probably appealing to the plurality of other believers at that time. Mind you, he's writing 4 decades after this scene happened with Jesus, and he's writing his gospel in the early church, and those are affirming that he is a living witness of Jesus, who saw him, who was taught by him, who walked with him, who prayed with him, who was at the cross, who touched him, and who witnessed him in his risen glory. He's saying, I was there. And all those early church believers along with John knew that. And he's saying, we know that this is true. This is incontrovertible. John's witness here is immensely personal and experiential. He's not writing a secondhand account. He was there. He saw all this. That's where you get all these details. You say, where's all this coming from? The 153 fish in verse 11. All of the detail, the charcoal fire, because he was there. Even as he's describing Peter jumping off the boat and swimming 100 yards while he's still on the boat, these are all earmarks of an eyewitness testimony. You could trust it. This is somebody who saw him in his risen glory. That's what he's saying. My testimony is true. It is true and it is trustworthy. And then he ends with one of the most sweeping, Christological, and theological statements in all the Bible about Jesus. Listen to what he says. Now there are also many other things that Jesus did. Were every one of them to be written, I suppose that the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. So now he's not just primarily referring to the things that Jesus did during his incarnation and his 30 or some odd years on earth, is he? He did a lot. He did a lot more miracles, more healings, more demons cast out? Absolutely. John only records 7. You see the myriad other ones in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. This is true. But he can't just be referring to those things in all of his powerful sermons and orations and preachings and teachings. No, he couldn't be. That would be illogical. That would be irrational. How could he say all the books in the world could not contain what Jesus said or did in the space of 3.5 years or so? That's not true. You could fit those in a library. You could describe those in human language and terms. You could contain those. We have them contained. A sprinkling and a sampling of them in the Gospels. So that's not what he's saying now, is it? He's saying something much more profound. John is making this far-reaching, universal, theological assertion that we need to understand in terms of what he told us about Jesus at the beginning of his gospel. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and in and through him all things were made and find their life and sustenance and existence. That's what he is saying here. He's saying if the world would try to contain everything that Jesus is as the Son of God, everything that he's done from eternity past, his eternal decrees, his creation, his redemption, his speaking the universe into existence, his sustaining and upholding a word of his power by which he sustains all of creation in the universe in the palm of his hand. He's saying these things cannot be contained. That is impossible. The works of the eternal Word of God cannot be exhaustively recorded by finite, limited human beings. He's saying the fullness of Christ's glory cannot be captured by ink and parchment. The infinite deeds of the Creator cannot fit within human limitations of language and histories and libraries and catalogs and categories. Are you kidding me, he's saying? You're going to confine God to human categories? No. Nor could the scope of his power or compassion or providence and wisdom and sovereignty over every moment of human history. It is beyond computation. Every heartbeat, every breath, every atom continues to exist and to be upheld by the word of his power. He's saying this is uncontainable. It's indescribable. Line up all the supercomputers in the world with the incredible powers of generative AI technology as you're seeing. Give me ChatGPT 5.1. Give me Google Gemini Pro. Give me Grok. Give me Perplexity. Put them all together in the same room, and they would barely even scratch the surface and begin to plumb the depths of the infinite wisdom and power of God. That's what John's saying here. You can clap for that. Please do. And look at these marvelous bookends. The first verse of John and the last verse of John, ending on the highest, most majestic and glorious note possible. The preeminence and supremacy of Jesus. In the beginning was the Word, he said. And at the end he says, the world could not contain all the books about the Word. Wow. This is not just a man from Nazareth. That's what John wants you to know. This is the infinite, eternal, incomparable Son of God. The one that he wrote his gospel, as he says at the end of chapter 20, in verse 31, he wrote these things and these signs that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ and the Son of God and have eternal life in his name. That's who he wants you to know. That Jesus, the real Jesus. The real Jesus. For decades, Peter will feed Christ's lambs. He will tend Christ's sheep, and he'll preach Christ's gospel, strengthening Christ's church, and walk the costly road Jesus spoke of that morning. You will stretch out your hands. And when that day finally came, Peter did stretch out his hands. He didn't shrink back like he did in the garden. He didn't shrink back like he did in the high priest's courtyard. No, he embraced the cross and the destiny for which his Lord had prepared him, equipped him, and called him. And he met it head on, in full confidence and faith, that the moment he would breathe his last would be the moment that he would see his Lord again. He willingly offered his hands to the crossbeam. But he had one request. One final request to his executioners. He said, "Don't nail me right side up. I want you to crucify me upside down, because I am totally unworthy of dying in the same manner and mode in which my Lord died. I cannot. Put me upside down." To add even more shame, he said, "I'm embracing that." Tradition says they did. He remembered the words Jesus had spoken. And with courage only grace could produce, he did that. The man who once collapsed in cowardice now rises in courage. And the voice that once denied Jesus now declares his glory even unto death. And the disciple who once ran from the cross now embraces it with pure joy. Why? Because the risen Christ restored him, redirected him, and recommissioned him for a story only God's grace could write. Friends, Jesus today asks you the same simple, searching question. Do you love me? It's the same question. Every time your faith fails, every time you sin, every time you deny him, he is yet asking you, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? To give you another chance to pick yourself back up and keep following him. And the answer, the only answer to that question for those that have truly believed upon him is the same answer that Peter gave. Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. And Jesus' answer to you is the same one he gave to Peter. Then feed my lambs. Tend my sheep. Feed my sheep. 3 wounds, 3 questions, 3 restorations. Infinite grace.